Folks. This is Herb Stevenson. This is our next episode of Revealing the Unmarked Doors of Life, Natural Passages. It's before Christmas. Um, for many people, it's a very, very difficult time, um, especially with all the uncertainty going on in the country. And holidays have a tendency to trigger most of us into a lot of past memories that we're not so fond of. So I wanted to share with you something that I think might be useful for you. Um, it's we've talked about this in the past, but I want to talk about it from a point of view of Christmas or the holidays. It's not just Christmas because almost all of the major holidays, the various religions are at this time of year. It's the closing, whether it be solstice, Hanukkah, Christmas, various others. One of the things for us to remember is the close of a year is a time to begin to really pay attention to ourselves and what have we accomplished, what are we grateful for. We often think about what are we are regretting, and especially with family gatherings, things of that nature. I wanted to apply 4 principles of listening that I think might be useful to you. Um, Oftentimes, when we get in the holidays or in difficult situations of uncertainty, whether it be our job or our family, um, we actually think we're listening, but what we're listening to is ourself. We're listening to a recording of all the stories of the past events, none of which are real anymore. They've all already transpired, they've gone. Um, Transpire is probably the best word to say because they really have no relevance to you now, except that you're holding on to it. It's an unfinished piece of business. So, oftentimes when we do this, we're actually harming ourselves and we're not allowing ourselves to actually see the beauty that's around us. So, maybe we don't have a perfect family, but are there things to be grateful for? So, I want to talk about that in terms of the 4 levels of listening. Level one is typically is our daily not listening, not present at all. So, most people would struggle with that. By saying it that way? But generally, what's happening is sounds occurring. We tend to be listening more to ourselves than we are to the other person, and this happens oftentimes around the holidays. We automatically assume that whatever happened in the past is going to happen again. So we're listening from the assumption that I already know what's going to be said, and therefore I listen only to confirm my internal belief, which means I'm listening to myself. From a humanistic or a very personal point of view, you might think of it this way. Not listening is an existential act of indicating that the person does not exist or does not deserve to be heard. And we often don't really realize that. And when we're listening only to ourselves, which a lot of people do this, is when they hear somebody speaking, they will listen about 20% and then start listening to themselves, which is whatever kind of rebuttal or disagreement or see, I told you so type of thing happens. And the impact of that is we lose sight of actually um, not only them, but ourselves. So this is a very common process. Um, and what we need to do is break that trance or that habitual pattern of not listening to others and listening too much to ourselves. And one of the ways you can do that is to be an attentive presence. Uh, and this applies to all 4 levels of listening. Uh, Look the person in the eyes, open your posture instead of doing what a lot of us do is we cross our arms and cross our legs and we look down or we look all over the place and we basically um, entertain ourselves to avoid making true contact. But if we make eye contact and just relax while listening and be present, attentive, but not overly eager, what ends up happening is we begin to see the person in a better way. And this goes even further when we go into the next level, uh, which is I had already alluded to it that reactive listening is basically once the person starts talking, I start diluting their story or whatever it is they were saying. This happens tremendously in marriages where the other person says you're not listening, and one or the other says, "Well, yes, I am," and gets angry, and that their anger is actually at themselves because they just got caught not listening. They really weren't paying attention, and that creates difficulty. And so during the holidays, take the time to find out, what's important to people, and just listen. And you can rephrase or summarize, or even go one step further if you feel quite bold, which is to say, I wonder how that felt for you to go through that experience as they're uh, recalling their experience for the year. So oftentimes what happens is when we fall into this reactive place, it's rather interesting because the reaction is based on something that's already occurred in the past, probably isn't even relevant anymore, but we still continue to pull it forward. And it's just interesting to me how we can't let go of the past. We would rather bring a wound from the past instead of moving forward. And I'm not necessarily saying that you need to forgive the other person. Something I've been sharing with people here lately is if you're highly reactive, you probably need to forgive yourself for having that reaction. It may have felt appropriate at the time, but you're not that person anymore. And so holding on to that reaction on an extended basis, pardon me, prevents you from actually being fully present and probably being the person you want to be. So the idea is listening to the sense of awareness is hearing the whole person. And when you listen to the whole person, this is even children taking the time. If you watch people who are really good with children, they really pay attention. They talk about feelings and various other things. And the impact of that is they're able to support that person to be engaged and support each other. Pardon me, sinuses. So when that happens, especially if we use the example of children, the people who fully engage the children look them in the eye. Grandparents often do this, but some really good parents do it. But if you watch children when they're playing together, those who are best friends always pay a lot of attention to each other. And as a result of that is paying attention to is acknowledging you're engaging that person in that moment, and you let go of the story. So I guess what I'm trying to say is everybody wants to be validated by feeling that somebody listened to them, and I don't really care who the human being is. Obviously, there are those who really don't feel that way. If they were to be validated, would be too much contact. But for the most part, I would say 99% of people actually want to be validated. And then that validation is it means somebody really truly is listening. So paraphrasing is a really good comment, a restatement, exactly what was been said is a good way of doing it. But if you want to get even more personal, you ask them in advance, I wonder how that felt for you, or I can only imagine how that felt when they're either talking about joy or something very difficult. It really doesn't matter which it is. Validation is the point, and that helps them and helps you to be able to make contact in a way that feels engaging. So it's like you need to put aside your reactions, which are concerns, attitudes, ideas, and just listen to the content. Recently, I was working with a group of men, and one of the individuals said, when I quit listening to my emotional reactions and I listened to what was actually being said to me, in this case, it was his spouse, he said that there was no emotional tones to the words. There was nothing in the content that was indicting. And as a result, he was able to shift his perspective from his past to his present and literally listen, which ended up leading to a much better and far more valuable conversation. And that's the one of the issues that is um, so important, especially going into the holidays. And most people, there'll be some people who at this point will say to me, well, you don't know my family, or you don't know my boss, or you don't know whoever. And no, I don't. But what I do know is if you decide to be responsible for how you listen and how you eliminate reactivity and judgment, the impact of that is you begin to actually see that person for who they are. And that means when you begin to do that is when you're able to pay attention to the feelings of that person. You see the nuances in their eyes, the vulnerabilities that comes up. So it opens the listener and allows an experience to stand in the other person's shoes. So it's a very much an empathic listening process. And it's not being sympathetic. It's just simply saying, how do I relate to you if I were in that situation? And oftentimes in saying that to another person, we begin to uh, listen for emotion, point of view, logic without a reaction. And some of you are sitting back still saying, well, what do you mean reaction? Well, reaction is anytime you hijack the conversation and take it over from your own historical past and throw an emotional overlay on top of it, which basically means you've imposed yourself and your own experience from the past to this situation, which allows you no possibility of making a connection with them. And I think that's what most people are actually trying to do, um, is find connection. Um, and a lot of people confuse empathy with sympathy, and sympathy is actually creates a disconnect. It drives disconnection because I'm starting to feel sorry for you, which I perpetuate your story, and it becomes more about me sympathizing with you instead of me supporting and relating to you and wherever you are and what's going on. And the interesting part is as I develop more of that capacity over the years for myself, many people look at me and say, has anybody listened to me the way you do? And if you get to that point where your mind's not chitter chattering, you're just fully present and making eye contact with that person, they're going to feel that. And when they feel that, that's when you begin to feel the engagement and begin to realize that the actual purpose in life that all of us have is we want to be validated. And when that happens, listening becomes generative. It's a type of listening that connects to the real source of who is this person and who are they moving towards being. Without judges, not my place or my uh, responsibility about them. My responsibility is how do I stay connected? How do I stay engaged with this person? Now, I realize that we all have our historical past that triggers us. Depression is abundant, suicides are abundant during this time of year. And then when you also throw in all the uncertainty of what's happening in the world and all of the violence, it gets really easy to sit back and say, well, how do you not react? I understand that it's just practice. You've heard me often say, is this 5 minutes of quiet? I'll take 1 minute of just being silent, just sitting in the quiet. And even if your mind chitter chatters, it's the act of actually taking time to be quiet and the mind let it run. And you can actually even say my monkey mind is out of control, or you're having digital diarrhea of the mind. It doesn't really matter. Make some humor of it so that you break the trance of allowing it to continue to move forward. Because what I want you to look at is if you can have a we experience, which is me and you becomes we in any situation over Christmas, doing it without expectations or reactivity, the result is you have a much more exciting and let's just say more pleasant experience about the holidays. And I realize that for some people that sounds like an impossibility, but I'm just going to ask you just try. Look, if I were to just meet this person and not judge them, how would I be able to just hear the words as my individual I pointed out said, and not get into my story about the past or not get worried about being embarrassed or not whatever other worry we have? How do I go about doing that? Because that becomes generative listening. Generative listening is I'm connecting, and my presence is when I listen beyond the words and the feelings, and the person actually feels like there's a connection. Those who've followed some of the things I've done, that's what I call it. It's an intimate moment. It's when presence with just an appropriate level of vulnerability touches. Most of the time, we talk about that romantically, but the truth of the matter is, you can have it the moment you see a newborn baby. You can have it a precious moment of seeing a child do something or someone you love do something and it touches your heart. That's a balance of presence and vulnerability that allows you to feel intimate. Those same type of things in varying degrees can happen anytime when you're listening because you're supporting the other person to experience uh, themselves because you're deeply hearing them and instead of listening to yourself. So in other words, you fully enter their world as a presence. And as a presence, that just simply means is I'm quiet, I'm receptive, I'm seeking a connection that's appropriate to the moment with this person, and it validates their existence and it validates my existence. So think about some of these things as you go into the holidays. If you have reactions that says bullshit and that that's not possible, you don't know me, you don't know my family, etc. No, I don't. But what I do know is if you take the time to get more present with anybody, brief eye contact, validating that you see them just through your eyes, a nod, a smile, all of those things lead to a deep sense of satisfaction internally and a capacity for you to be able to feel better about yourself and also to be able to accept them. It's not going to be perfect, but if you make the effort, you can find out that you'll have an appreciation for the holidays. And appreciation, just from the point of view, is it's the end of a year, completion of another successful year, an opportunity to look and say, what do I want to do different next year? And I hopefully it'll be more present to yourself and your family. So I wish you well. I'm not going to say happy holidays because I prefer to say this. I wish you a happy life because it shouldn't be just the holidays that we're happy. It should be that every day find one thing that makes you happy and every day find one thing that makes you happy about another person. And if you do that, the result of it is you have a much better life. I wish you well. It's Herb Stevenson from Natural Passages, Revealing Unmarked Doors of Life. In the near future, you'll be saying it. I've been publishing more books. There's a book coming out called Bear Attention, Coaching at the Point of Contact, and it's all the years of experience that I have of coaching individuals around the world. And it'll be out by year end this year. Take care and be well, and happy life.